The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Supernatural Existence and Causation.
You atheists, you're just so closed-minded. You're just blind advocates of naturalism and scientism. You won't even accept the possibility that the supernatural exists. Your standards of evidence are just too rigorous. Let's take a little time here and kind of dig into these objections to what is being propped up as an atheist position, when really what they're talking about is skepticism. What they're really objecting to is people who have standards of evidence that require that we have good reason to believe something before we accept that it's true. This subject has come up a lot over recent weeks in email and on the show, and I'm going to be doing some videos talking about personal revelation and other things like that. But I thought it'd be important to get kind of a firm grounding on this problem of confirming the existence of the supernatural, or confirming when or if there is supernatural causation. Now, this accusation that we're advocates of naturalism and scientism is one that I'm going to kind of dispense with rather quickly, because naturalism actually comes in two forms. Philosophical naturalism is a philosophical position that the natural world is in fact all that exists, that there is nothing supernatural. And I don't hold to that as an assertion, because I think it may go a step too far in saying that the supernatural doesn't exist. There are versions of philosophical naturalism that simply say the natural world is all that we have been able to confirm exists, and we don't have any good reason to think that there's anything beyond the natural world. And that's much better. It doesn't, go so far as to assert that there is nothing beyond the natural world. There could be. I don't know. I don't even know if I say there could be, I don't even know if that's actually possible. But what science makes use of is not philosophical naturalism, it's methodological naturalism. This is why skepticism adheres to it too, because skepticism is tied to science and the scientific method of inquiry. Methodological naturalism is not in any way an assertion that the supernatural does not in fact exist. It's merely a recognition of the limits that we have when it comes to investigating the natural world and investigating something supernatural. It is a recognition that we are currently blocked from properly investigating and being able to confirm anything supernatural. It's not an assertion that we are forever blocked. Scientism, which is something that gets tossed around as, oh, you're advocating for scientism. Scientism, in its simplest terms, is the idea that science is the only way of knowing. When it's presented in kind of this dogmatic sense, that it is the only way of knowing and it will always be the only way of knowing and there's no other possible ways of knowing, then it suffers from the same problems that philosophical naturalism does. But I don't think this is how scientism is actually presented by the people who might advocate for it. In reality, I think it's kind of saying that science, so far as we can tell, is the single most demonstrably reliable pathway to discovering truths about the natural world that we inhabit. It's basically claiming that appeals to other ways of knowing have not demonstrated that they are reliable, that they can produce correct results and good information. If your view of science simply holds that it's a body of demonstrable, reliable mechanisms that lead to correct results, then every reliable method would then be rolled into science, whether it is currently a part of science or not. When people object to scientism, the real objection seems to be that some people simply aren't open to exploring other possible ways of knowing. And that is a criticism that doesn't seem to apply to science at all. Matter of fact, it's often launched as oh, you don't want to include this in science curriculum or in teaching in schools. Well, yeah, because it's not actually established science yet, but that doesn't mean that science or scientists are opposed to investigating other proposed ways of knowing. The reality is that science is rigorous for good reasons. and that the time to pay attention to some new way of knowing is after it's been demonstrated to be reliable. Essentially, if it could be demonstrated that a Ouija board gave consistently reliable, accurate information, even if we didn't understand exactly how or why, that would still just get rolled into the scientific method. Now, it's bizarre and it's unlikely, and we already know that Ouija boards don't actually work in this way. But if anything could be demonstrated to consistently and reliably provide accurate and good information, it would probably get rolled in as just another tool in the science handbag. When it comes to the existence of the supernatural, we don't have any way of investigating beyond the natural world. And I've often talked about this idea that if a God exists, there's two possibilities. Either some God exists or no gods exist. The mutually exclusive positions there. And if some God exists, either it interacts with reality in some detectable way or it doesn't. And if it doesn't interact with reality in any detectable way, then it is indistinguishable from not existing. Its existence and non-existence are, from our perspective, identical. If, in fact, we're talking about a God that interacts with reality in some way, now we're talking about a supernatural being that causes some effect or phenomena in the natural world. That's kind of what we're talking about when we talk to many believers, because while there's no demonstrated mechanism for identifying that the supernatural exists or that it is in fact the cause of something, believers are running around claiming to be little God detectors. They seem to see and think they're reasonably reaching a conclusion that God has acted here. God helped them find their car keys. God helped them get off the booze. God helped them win the lottery, or whatever else they want to attribute to this. But when we talk about causes, and this is a complicated topic that I'm not going to get into. This is actually going to be a reasonably short video about the supernatural. When it comes to causation, there's this idea of necessary and sufficient causes, that in order to conclude that X is the cause of Y, X has to be both necessary to cause Y and sufficient to cause Y. And it's why you get complicated discussions about causality, where you've got like a fire triangle of three things that have to come together at the same time. And so it's the cause that brings those together, or the event that brings those together is the cause of the fire. There's also this idea of finding the proximate cause in a causal chain. For example, somebody had to manufacture this camera before I was actually able to use it. But the manufacturer of this camera is not the cause of me making this video. There are a lot of contributing factors. And the proximate cause of me making this video is me deciding to push the button that says record. And when we're determining what is the cause of something else, you could say that this is the cause. We've reasonably concluded that this particular event is the cause of this other event. We could also say that this is the probable cause, or this is probably the cause. And then there's something where we haven't really sorted out exactly what the cause is, but we can talk about how likely it is that something is the cause of something else. And we might say that this event is possibly the cause. And those are kind of degrees of confidence. We've determined that this is the cause, or this is probably the cause, or this is possibly the cause. But in order to say that something is possibly the cause of something else, you need to first of all confirm that the cause that you're going to attribute it to actually exists. And in the case of the supernatural, we don't have a way to do that yet. The next thing you need to do is be able to confirm that the event that you want to assign as the cause can in fact be the cause of that. So you'd have to demonstrate that it's possible to flap your wings and fly. The cause of me levitating off the ground is flapping my arms. You'd have to demonstrate that this is possible for one event to cause another. Then you'd have to actually demonstrate some evidence to support a causal connection between the two. to show that you have the right, out of the potential causes, you've actually come up with the correct cause or the probable cause. But having some way of calculating how likely it is that one event causes another means that you have to have kind of like a past history of those events causing effects. So you could say, 5 times out of 10 or 7 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, this is the cause of that. But we can't confirm supernatural existence. We can't confirm that it can, in fact, interact with the natural world to cause anything. And we need to do both and then determine how often a supernatural cause is the cause for a particular event. I mean, hey, a fire started, a fire started, a fire started, a fire started. Which one of those, how often is it that there's a supernatural cause in order for us to conclude that, oh, in this particular case, there's a 70% chance that the cause of this fire is supernatural. As it stands right now, every time we've confirmed a cause, it's been natural. We haven't been able to confirm any supernatural causes. Now, there are plenty of things where we haven't been able to confirm a cause, but we don't just get to go running to, we couldn't come up with a cause, so the supernatural caused that. And the objection quite often is that, well, you set up unfair standards of evidence that will prevent us from ever demonstrating that there is, in fact, supernatural causation. But it's not the fault of science or skepticism that you can't meet the burden of proof for your claim. If it's not that the standards of evidence are too high, it's that you have posited a claim that is either unverifiable, unfalsifiable, untestable, and therefore we cannot come up with evidence. And that doesn't mean that we should then lower our standards so that your pet theory or pet hypothesis about what the cause is manages to get in. We simply don't work that way. And we don't work that way for a reason. Science would have to consider, hey, is God messing around with our experiments? If I put these chemicals together and I get, different results at different times, is it because I mixed them inappropriately? Is it because of the temperature or some other condition in the room? Or is it also possible that, they're God or angels or fairies, or pick your supernatural thing, a ghost has come in and mysteriously added something to the process or changed something in the process such that my results are unreliable? Russell Glasser, who hosts the Atheist Experience with me, his dad had a saying that, he had a headache, so he took an aspirin and said a prayer, and his headache went away. It's a neat little take on supernatural causation that's meant to demonstrate that we couldn't possibly confirm that, in fact, it was the prayer that did it. But we do know that aspirin, without prayer, can help stop a headache. And so, yet there are people who, despite scientific information, despite us having known causes to events, still want to attribute it to the supernatural. And it's because we have minds that are sort of tuned to hate mysteries, to be fearful, I guess, of the unknown, and to seek out thinking agents as the cause for things when we can't think of anything else. As it stands now, we don't have any mechanism for confirming the existence of the supernatural, which means that we cannot have a rational justification for believing in the supernatural or for claiming that the supernatural can act as a cause. Will that ever change? Well, I don't know. Is it possible that we could somehow confirm the supernatural? I don't know. I don't see any way to do that. To me, it's a bit like asking what happened before the Big Bang. We may be permanently blocked from investigating. We seem to currently be blocked from investigating beyond the Big Bang. We seem to currently be blocked from investigating beyond the natural world. That doesn't mean that we will be forever, but that seems to be the case now. And it may be that the question of before the Big Bang doesn't make any sense, because if the model shows that time began to exist with the Big Bang, then there's no such thing as before the Big Bang. And if it turns out to be the case that the natural world is in fact all there is, then there is no supernatural world to explore. There are no supernatural things to explore. But we don't know that. There are those, though, who think that we can confirm the supernatural. And I used to kind of give glib answers along these lines of, well, what would convince you that God exists? Well, if there was writing in the sky all around the world that everyone could read, irrespective of what their language was, and it, was a declaration of, I am the Lord your God, blah, 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 that would be sort of so miraculous that we would be justified in saying that it had a supernatural cause. And that's completely wrong. I mean, I am convinced that that is completely wrong, and that what you're actually witnessing there, if you were to put it into a syllogistic form, is an argument from ignorance fallacy, essentially claiming, wow, this seems so extraordinary to me, and I have no naturalistic explanation, and I can think of no naturalistic explanation, and any sort of explanation I could even posit is so beyond my comprehension that I might as well just say that it's supernatural. If you go back in history, there are plenty of times where things like that, or arguments like that, could have been used to justify any number of claims. Once upon a time we didn't know anything about lightning, and so something along those lines was used to support the idea that the gods were throwing lightning bolts down. I think that there's a hidden argument from ignorance fallacy in every one of those examples. Arthur C. Clarke had famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and this is really the point that he's making. That, how would you know that some naturalistic explanation couldn't do this? I mean, it's almost arrogant to assume that you have the requisite knowledge to distinguish between an incredibly advanced technology that's beyond your comprehension and supernatural magical causation that's beyond your comprehension. The reason I say there's an argument from ignorance fallacy, and there is when you plot it out like a syllogism, what they're basically saying is that because we don't have any known natural explanation, that the true explanation can be reasonably presumed to be supernatural. And I don't know what the justification is for the alternate, or for not going with the alternate, which is that since we don't have a known natural explanation, it's possible that there's an unknown natural explanation. That seems to just get disregarded. The point here is not that there is nothing supernatural. The point is there's nothing that we can currently confirm as supernatural. Now, maybe there is nothing supernatural. There's no supernatural things, there's no supernatural agents, there's nothing more than the natural world. And as humans, we're uncomfortable with not knowing, and so we tend to posit the sort of explanations that lead us to that. But that alone is not confirmation, it's not sufficient, and it doesn't get us where we need to go with respect to figuring out what the truth is. Until there's a mechanism that allows us to explore and investigate this, we are blocked. Not necessarily blocked forever. But it's not the fault of science or scientists, skeptics or skepticism, that the various claims about the supernatural can't be demonstrated. It's the fault of the claims. If you make a claim that isn't verifiable, isn't falsifiable, isn't testable, appeals to things that we cannot confirm, that's a problem with the claim, not the method. The methods are rigorous for a reason. Saying that the standards of science are too high doesn't solve this problem. The standards are high so that we believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. They are high because the truth should be able to meet those. Those things which are rationally justified, those things which we have really good reasons to believe, have no problem overcoming those standards of evidence. We have learned so much about the universe that we inhabit. We have so many right answers, so many more right answers than we had, or seemingly right answers than we had a century ago or 2 centuries ago. Every bit of science has to overcome these rigorous standards of evidence. And it's there to keep us from making too many mistakes. If you lower those standards of evidence, you are opening yourself up to a whole realm of mistakes. Claiming that the people who don't accept your proposed supernatural causes are too closed-minded also doesn't resolve it. Especially when the truth is that we are, in fact, open-minded. We just have standards of evidence that prevent us from being so open-minded that our brains fall out, or is the popular joke, but that we're so open-minded that we make mistakes that lead us down dark paths, and away from the truth. The claim that atheists or skeptics or whoever are somehow biased against the supernatural may apply to some people. It may be the case, oh my gosh, we've tested psychics over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they've always failed. When do we stop? When do we just stop paying attention to this? Why do we have to keep testing it? There's no such thing as psychics. Now you're closed-minded. You have blocked off any possibility. Ha ha ha, you're no longer rational. Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you reach a point where you say, you know what, we've investigated this claim, and until you come up with something new, some new compelling evidence, I don't think we should waste resources investigating this. We're not necessarily asserting that there's no such thing as psychic, and there's no such thing as ghosts, there's no such thing as UFOs, there's no such things as gods. What we're saying is that we've looked around, we've investigated this, we have done this to the best of our ability. We have had an open door policy, present your argument, present your evidence, and all of them have fallen short. And we'll continue to explore the world, and we'll continue to reevaluate claims, even claims that seem to be a time waster based on what we know. But there are limits, and the limits have to do with our time. I would much prefer that scientists be actively pursuing potential cures to diseases and new ways to increase crop growth so that we solve problems of disease and poverty, than for them to investigate yet another claim that God grew my limb back, or that I've spoke to my dead Uncle Bill and he can tell me where the family will is, or maybe not. As we move forward to talk about claims of personal revelation, I think we'll find that there's a bias there, that somebody already accepts that this is possible. And that's the point that we need to address. How did you reach the conclusion that it's possible for the supernatural to exist, that it's possible for the supernatural to interact with the natural world? And then once you determine it's possible, how did you determine that it's probable? Where are the calculations that show how likely it is that the supernatural is interacting? And this is all glossed over when people begin to say, well, God did this, God did that. Why is it glossed over? Why is it that the people who are trying to point out that you haven't yet met your burden of proof on the existence of the supernatural, and you haven't provided us a mechanism to show that the supernatural can act as a cause of something in the natural world, let alone that it does act as a cause, why are those individuals mocked for having standards that are too high? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't it be the case that your standards are so low that we can demonstrate that if we applied your standards universally, there's almost nothing that you couldn't believe. There's nothing you can't justify by faith. And as soon as you get rid of the rigors of science and say, well, my pet idea should be given some kind of special consideration, we then open up that special consideration to competing ideas. And then the two people who both claim that their particular gods caused some event are on equal footing. And they are on equal footing. Equally irrational, equally unstable, equally unjustified. Whether Zeus, Thor, Ra, Yahweh, or some other god acted as something that you've got to come up with a mechanism to distinguish. And if there's several of you making the same claim, I think it's fair to dismiss all of them until you manage to get together and come up with some way that we can reliably confirm the existence of the supernatural and that can act as a cause.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.